So welcome everyone. Happy that you're here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I'm going to be addressing the new BPAP for the accessibility standards of the group today, because we want to make sure that everyone is able to start that process on your campus. And I want to just give you a couple of pointers and some background tips. As you begin this process, one of the things I wanted to share with you is that you can start from anywhere you are on your campus, depending on what your role is, as long as you communicate and understand that the processes that you establish on your campus involve everyone that touches accessibility. So just to give you a little bit of background, I am a faculty member who works in DSPS and the Faculty Resource Center. I coordinate accessibility on our main campus, which is attached by a bridge on two sides of the campus. Also, we have two campuses for the School of Extended Learning, Cosmetology campus, and of course, online accommodations. In my past life, I was a chair of the High Tech Center Advisory Board for a number of years. Also, when the first web-based online courses began, and we had the California Virtual Centers. I was a mentor for one of those centers. Also, I was tapped to teach the first Creating Accessible Online courses for our system. In those courses were not only faculty who were from our colleges, but also faculty from around the country. I have been past DTAC chair for distance education. When we first started that process back in 2008, the distance ed guidelines were separate from the accessibility guidelines that were created in answer to the OCR concerns of the California community colleges. So we merged the accessibility language with those DE guidelines. Those were written in 2008. We revised them again in 2011 and in 2019. I reviewed with other people to align with those standards. Also, I've been the Vice President of Academic Senate as a Senator for Educational Support Division, which includes our Learning Resource Center, Academic Counseling, Library, Faculty Resource Center, Career Center, and Senate liaison to all of our faculty professional development committees. Also, as a representative from the Academic Senate of the California Community Colleges to the TTAC committee, which approved the accessibility standards. And we are one of the member colleges of the Vision Resource Center, where as a member, you have access to those accessibility modules, which will be discussed in the next workshop. Also, I'm the co-chair for our Student Equity and Achievement Committee, the Curriculum Committee member, a committee for online instruction, where we just completed our distance education plan. And as a representative to the TTAC committee, as I mentioned, approving the accessibility standards, which is pretty much a 3 to 4 year process. And of course, the holy grail on all of our campuses is accreditation. So currently we are in that process. I'm a steering committee member and also the faculty lead for Standard 3, which includes human resources, finances, physical facilities, and technology. So it's through all of those experiences, I lend the lens of accessibility and how it affects each of those areas and the people involved in order to make it happen on your campus. So today's outcome, basically making sure that you are aware that the resources available in the BPAP are on the CCC accessibility website. So if you haven't had a chance to really dig into that website, I really want to encourage you to do that, because there's some great resources that were developed as part of this accessibility standards creation. Also, trying to help you understand what barriers you might come up against and support you in the need in starting this process on your campus. so that the CCC Accessibility Center can help develop resources to support you. And then hopefully moving your campus towards getting the new BPAP on your board agenda for spring. So this is my campus experience. I was a member of the Accessibility Work Group Committee. We started with a consultant, and basically our process to get this approved by the board, the Community College League of California, through our work group, established a new template for the BPAP. It was presented to what we call our Board Policies and Academic Procedures Committee in September of 2019. It was sent to our Senate committees for discussion, no changes. And then it was approved by our board after 2 readings, December 2019, and then it was posted on our college website, December 2019. So I wanted to make sure that you had some history and some context for the accessibility standards, because as you go throughout your campuses and you try to communicate a concerted and coordinated approach, it's helpful to have the history. Otherwise, people think you're coming out of left field. And the truth is, this has been going on for a very long time. It's really the opportunity where we have actually been able to get something at the chancellor's office level that you can enact on your campuses. So the priority for the accessibility standards were created back in 2016. The goal was to define the accessibility standards and implement technology to ensure access. We convened a system-wide working group focused on producing a guide to accessibility standards, vetting and recommending technology tools, and creating training materials. That information is located on the CCC Accessibility website. Why this was important, you've heard it before in today's workshops. It meets state and federal requirements. It creates clear processes towards student success. It supports colleges by clearly communicating requirements. Complex standards are turned into actionable steps, and equal opportunity and moral issues are addressed on your campus. The bottom line, it supports access, equity, and inclusion. Our short-term metric, it defines accessibility operational standards in plain English. The goal is to identify best practices for meeting those requirements. Suggesting that a board policy and administrative procedures needed to be created at a higher level than what we could do as a working group. Producing purchasing guidelines, communicate to faculty and other staff these standards and responsibilities, and indicating how to make fixes and create resources to leverage and meet compliance standards. So the next 2 slides are giving you some dates for the milestones that we achieved with these standards. In May 2017, the Accessibility Standards Working Group was formed. In August 2017, the first draft of the accessibility standard was given to the Chancellor's Office. December 2017, just so happened at that time, the state auditor released a report basically saying that the community colleges were not doing enough in terms of accessibility. May 2018, adoption of the accessibility standard by the TTAC Advisory Committee. And in June 2018, a letter from Chancellor Oakley was sent out to all of the CEOs of all 116 colleges, including the totally online college, saying that basically the way that the campuses can help the Chancellor's Office achieve these goals is by paying attention and enacting these standards. In November 2018, we were told, actually at the beginning of the standards working group, that the Chancellor's Office was undergoing comprehensive planning efforts and that anything that we did around the accessibility standards had to align with the vision for success. In 2019, the Community College League adopted the board policy and administrative procedure. And then other items that we tried to complete, we published a Section 508 guidance for colleges, a maturity model for benchmarking and recommended action steps. We published faculty and purchaser FAQs. In 2019, we gave the first workshop at the Summer Online Teaching Conference. And in the fall 2019, we gave a workshop at the fall KPED conference for all of the CCs, CSUs, and UCs attending for disabilities in higher education. Just to give you a snapshot of what Chancellor Oakley said, basically, historically, our system has handled accessibility issues by siloing it in the DSPS programs. This is untenable and ignores the fact that accessibility is an institutional responsibility insofar as it touches every aspect of students and the public's experiences with our system. Our office is working across divisions to support this work, and he requested that we as a system advance the effort by bringing campus community together to discuss and implement policies, procedures, and practices in order to meet our legal obligations. So for institutional support, the baseline is available to you, and that's BP 3725. The local level, you want to be able to start having this conversation on your campuses with that committee that oversees the BPs and APs and prepares it for the board. You need a strong executive leadership in order to champion accessibility, especially when the board has questions about what this BP AP means. You want to be able to develop processes and procedures with your committees on campus, both faculty and college-wide committees. You want to document, create goals, and measure processes and procedures. On the CCC accessibility website, you have the document that outlines everything for this standard, so I won't go into a lot of detail here. The question I get often is, what is the role of the Chancellor's Office in promoting accessibility standards? And the goal is supporting districts by developing guidance and coordinating any systems or activities serving as a resource if any implementation or service or challenges arise, in maintaining effective ongoing communication with relevant parties. That can be within the system or outside of the system. The district's roles in the accessibility standards is that the heads of districts are responsible for facilitating and ensuring implementation of the standard at the respective community college districts. We have single districts, we have multi-college districts. So the way you approach it is going to be very different and based on the culture and the infrastructure of your districts. So recommended for districts, it's important to establish written procedures for the compliance process, procedures for periodically monitoring the accessibility of college websites, instructional materials, persons responsible for supporting access, and you'll learn more about this in the next workshop through the VRC modules, 508 coordinators, access specialists, faculty support centers, faculty, DSPS, procurement officers, and many more. So the question is, what will be your process? What have you started? Where are you stuck? And what do you need to do? So basically review what you currently have on record in terms of your BPs and APs. What communication needs to occur with IT and faculty? What communication needs to occur with Academic Senate? You want to establish your review timelines, and your main goal is to get that board policy approval and implementation going. In 2020, the pandemic forced accessibility forward. So I know what my focus was, and it was basically reviewing the emergency DE addendas for online instruction Equity, diversity, inclusion, universal design, and accessibility kicked in for this course review process and teaching faculty the approaches for meeting these outcomes. Accessibility and equity review became part of the emergency DE curriculum review process. Faculty were trained in the Faculty Resource Center using accessibility checkpoints available in Canvas and adapting instructional materials. Students were adapting with checked out Chromebooks, hotspots, virtual desktop infrastructure, tutoring, and accommodations when necessary. 2021 is where we're hitting the reset button. You remember the accessibility standards were approved in 2019 or 2018, and here we are in 2021. I feel like we lost a year in the 2020 pandemic, but now it's an opportunity to kind of rethink where we are and where we need to go. So the spring courses are still being reviewed for accessibility and equity. We have separate processes for each of those. We created a DE help team within our curriculum committee to review that information. The curriculum committee is currently undergoing conversations around how to ensure equity in all of the courses. Accessibility is part of that conversation. The district and instructional technology committees are working together to examine the tools needed for online instruction, not only currently, but when we return to campus, what is that going to look like? We have sent out surveys both to students and faculty in order to gain a better perspective on the tools that they expect students to have in the classroom. Both committees will be examining results this semester. And AP 3725 will be adapted for new circumstances faced during the pandemic. And then the District Technology Committee just finished its District Technology Plan, which also forces us to rethink what stopgap measures we need to add to that next plan. So the call to action for all of you is to meet the goals of the Vision for Success. You want to move your BPAP forward for board approval. You want to gain support from your colleagues to put those processes in place. If you have an existing accessibility policy related, which is different than the BPAP 3725, take another look at it and update based on the Community College League template. Because when 508 first came out, the low-hanging fruit for a lot of us was the web access or web accessibility. Now we've expanded all of that, and you want to make sure that the umbrella 3725 captures all the work that you've done previously. You want to reduce equity gaps among underrepresented student groups, design with the students in mind, and increase training that helps faculty understand how students with disabilities access their course materials. Questions?
Laurie, thank you. During the presentation, there were a few questions that have been answered. One was, what does BPAP stand for? Board Policies Administrative Procedures. Some people put some examples related to related in there, but here we have another, we have a question. I have looked at the Portland Community College as a reference, which was put in as a reference earlier. It is a good example of, is there a good example of a college in California for how they have adopted this campus-wide, especially in meeting STEM needs? Let me scroll back up here.
In meeting STEM needs?
Yes, the STEM, so the STEM math or STEM needs for.
So are we talking about two different things? Or?
Did you want me to clarify?
Yeah, if you could clarify. I was trying to scroll up and find your original question for a little more context. So if you could clarify, that would be great.
So math and sciences, we have unique challenges with accessibility and meeting accessibility. requirements because we're not text-based and we're non-linear. So I was wondering if there is a California community college that has kind of like the best example, like, you know, I could go talk to them and say, hey, how'd you get this, your accessibility, everybody on board campus wide? And, you know, because we need specifically math, we need like math type and possibly Equatio. We have very specific needs. Otherwise, if we don't have the software, we cannot make our things accessible typically. So is there a California community college that has successfully, like, is there a good example that I could go to start talking to them about how they got it going? What are they doing? So far, all I've found is Portland Community College, but that's obviously in Oregon.
Don, you want to take that one?
So really, in relation to this presentation, the place to start is to make sure you have board policies and administrative procedures. If you don't have those within your district, it's going to be a bigger challenge to get that traction going. In terms of specifically around math STEM, I do know that I see that there was another resource for College of the Desert put into the chat. We do have a session later on today about math STEM and how to make math STEM accessible. Math STEM nationally has been a challenge to make accessible on the front end. And so they're working on it. A lot of different institutions are working on it. I'm guessing that within the CCC, there are individuals that are doing a wonderful job with that. I just don't know of any institutionally wide, and I haven't had a chance to look at the College of the Desert resource that was just entered.
I think one thing I will say that will help make it a little bit easier for your faculty, as chair of the Instructional Technology Committee, I had a conversation with all of the division reps around our committee table when the accessibility standards were approved. And it was a really interesting conversation around what was going to be difficult. And it was, of course, the math and science faculty who had concerns. And that was in the fall. In the spring, the pandemic hit. And then all of a sudden, everybody was having to deal with accessibility. So part of the review process for the DE addendas was making sure that the communication was happening with each individual faculty member who submitted a course to be taught online, and ensuring that they understood the difference between accessibility and equity. And I think that really helped, so that when the tools are available for math and science to be implemented on your campus, I think the conversation and the willingness will go a lot easier.
All right, so we have another question in the chat. Who is responsible for bringing the BPAP to the district? Admin, faculty, anyone?
So on our campus, we have a specific board policy administrative procedure committee. It's a college-wide committee. There are representatives from human resources. Our academic senate president sits on there, classified, a number of people, and they review all the BPs, APs, especially those new templates coming from CCLC, and try to look for either a similar committee on your own campus, or just go directly to the president's office and say, how do I get this conversation started? And you might have a committee you're unaware of.
I just have a follow-up question to that. I didn't know if it was something like faculty purview or responsibility of admin, or really it's really the responsibility of everyone.
It really is.
Okay.
And especially when I mentioned, you know, accreditation being the holy grail, the work that we do on our campuses has an endpoint. And the endpoint is when the accreditors come to your campus And in your self-study, you have said, these are the things that we're doing around accessibility. And then of course, the question is, where's the evidence to support that? So you want to make sure that your board policies and APs are in line with what you say you're doing on your campus. It just so happens that a lot of this work that I've done on the campus currently is happening at the same time accreditation is happening. We have gone through a major revision of a lot of our planning documents, such as the DE plan, the district technology plan, strategic directions, educational master plan. All of that is in preparation for writing the self-study. And within each of those standards, you have a standard 2B, student services. There are accessibility checkpoints in there that you could add. Then standard 3, which is technology and human resources and physical and facilities and technology. Of course, there are natural areas where you can add accessibility information in terms of training, support, the training that you do campus-wide, as well as individually with faculty through your centers or however it's designed on your campus. So all of the work that we're doing and we're asking you to do system-wide is going to end up being valuable to you when accreditation comes around, and also for the Office of Civil Rights, should any of your colleges have any of those complaints, because then you're providing proof and evidence for the work that you're doing. Because one of the questions OCR will ask is, what is your process? Where is it written? What policies do you have? So you want to have a clear understanding and help train your campus in knowing that information.
I just wanted to tell very briefly about the story of our campus, Santa Rosa Junior College. We did manage to get a new accessibility policy through in kind of record time. It took about maybe 5-6 months. Usually it takes over a year. We went through the gauntlet. We had to bring it to every single stakeholder group on campus, and got a lot of feedback and had to, you know, soften some language and really negotiate. The biggest thing, and I wrote this already in the chat, that I would say is that in our situation, it was critical to have faculty members on board and willing to speak to the necessity of it. Our faculty union is quite strong and is not always excited about online accessibility in terms of course materials. So it was really helpful to have already sort of done some legwork with different groups on campus. We had the backing of our district access committee, which brought it to our group that makes these decisions, and then the members of whom showed up at every single presentation we did, and spoke from their different perspectives as different stakeholders. So anyway, I just wanted to add that piece of information.
I think what you're pointing out is that you have to have the conversations everywhere. It can't just be held in one particular committee, because everyone has a responsibility, but everyone also wants to learn about it. And so the poll that was taken earlier in a workshop about who's attending this meeting, it's everyone that touches accessibility, from support staff to faculty to administrators. Whether you're IT, whether it's a technical question, a process question, a policy question, an instructional question, it really is helpful to work with your campus colleagues. And I'm fortunate to have some really great colleagues to work with. So when I get stuck on something that has to deal with accessibility, I can reach out to them and we can put our heads together about it, and vice versa.
It sounds like getting aligned with the right people is key to, and the question is, what is Leah's role?
Actually, my position then was, we actually created a position called Coordinator of Online Accessibility, and that was my role at that time. I'm no longer in that role, but so through that role, I had already been able to create relationships with different people on campus by doing trainings on how to create accessible PDFs and educational materials, and working with Corrine, who's here, who's in our distance education program and does a lot of accessibility directly with faculty. So I already had a presence, and I'd already been hammering publicly the necessity for accessibility to be taken more seriously. And it was because of my job title that I was able to get to the place where there was enough awareness of accessibility that we could even talk about having. We had a policy, but it was very threadbare and really only dealt with a few situations. So anyway, yeah, doing the legwork beforehand was critical.
And if I could just comment, what we had that was threadbare was on the IT side of it, which covered, the website. But the academic side, we had a very forward-thinking policy. And what Leela managed to do was bring the two together under one roof. So we had one board policy that covered both sides of it.
I think that's the challenge, is to make sure there's a good flow. And sometimes with the work, especially with the online work, you'll hear on your campuses where faculty will weigh in strongly about a direction, but you have to make sure that the voice for accessibility on the student side through IT, DSPS are also in there, so that the outcome for the student is not confusing, and also for the rest of campus.
One other thing I would say about getting Leela's job to begin with, and then her role and all of that, that sort of came about because of all the lawsuits that were happening due to websites. And we used that, and the HR director got very interested, and she was a VP at our school, so that was really key. And using what was happening with all of these lawsuits and happening in the CCC system allowed us to actually get this position of Leela, and everything really, fell like dominoes after that.
I think we've learned a lot of hard lessons in our system. Back in 1999, when OCR came knocking on the door and saying we're going to do a review of, I think at that time it was 109 community colleges, we're up to 116. We really had to do a tremendous amount of work to ensure that the building blocks were in place, and that was 1999. And here we are in 2021. Every campus in our system has the pieces. It's just a matter of coordinating it and having better communication and making sure that your documentation is at a point where you feel comfortable and it can be provable as evidence when accreditation comes knocking.
All right, another question in the chat. It says, I am not sure if this is an impartial question, but I am wondering if there are campuses that have designated accessibility heads or departments.
I think there's a little bit of everything. In fact, I know that as a fact. I think as people have come and gone in their positions across the system, positions are hired to fill in the gaps. And so sometimes you will see positions with a very, very long title but in some ways it makes it difficult for the people in those positions to get the work done because not one person can get the work done. If I've learned anything in doing this work over the years, you need partnerships, you need collaboration, you need the ability to be heard through committee structures and having good relationships with those folks who can help move the agenda forward. So I'm not sure if that answers your questions, but everyone's going to go about this a little bit differently, but the end goal is to get that approved at the board.
All right, another question in the chat is, how would you recommend ground floor employees like myself, an instructional designer, encourage top-level admins to implement our recently updated BPAPs? I am proudly my college's burr under the saddle on accessibility, but not sure I am having the effect.
Well, if we use our current example of the emergency DE addendas, how is that work being done? And where is that conversation? How is it being moved forward through your committee structures? Right now, faculty have a great deal to say about how they're trained and what the outcomes are. So you might have your faculty resource centers, if you happen to have one on your campus. You might have instructional designers responsible for access, or your alt media or assistive technology specialists responsible. Sometimes a committee structure between the district technology committee and the instructional technology committee and the committee for online instruction, having representation there, I think, is important because they're hearing the same information. And each of those committees is addressing instructional needs at a different level. And so whatever consistent voice you can lend, either through your own participation or through someone on Academic Senate, maybe through Educational Support Division. You said you were an instructional designer? Is that right?
Yes. I'm the only one on campus.
And who do you report to?
The head of our library, who is also, well, I guess that's it. We have a faculty online coordinator that's a committee position.
So one way I would approach it is okay, so when I was a Senate liaison for Educational Support Division, which is what it's called on our campus, that included the library. And so that Educational Support Division is very student-centered. So finding out which division the library is in could be a way of working it through the Senate representation. That might be an option for you.
Okay.
I really believe no one person can do this work alone. It's just too big. It's grown from when I started, the type of work I was doing then to where I am now. I had to start pulling in the campus colleagues into the conversation because it was just too unwieldy. If we are going to say what we are doing is positive, and if we're going to meet the vision for success goals, the campus conversation has to be broadened. And I've gone to the president's office many times and had individual meetings and brought other people into the office to have these conversations. Also with your VPs of instruction, that's an important conversation, who often, at least on our campus, the VP of instruction sits on Academic Senate. They might be called the Vice President of Instructional Programs or Educational Programs, but whoever is responsible for the instructional outcomes is a good person to start with.
Okay, so that's good advice. I do go to all these committees, and I'm working with all the recently online instructors, trying to train them and help them get on with the accessibility. I'm also on a committee at the district level because I'm Canvas support as well. And even though we updated our policies, actually putting people in those positions just gets brushed away. And, oh yeah, here's Sue going off on accessibility again. And it just seems like we're doing it at the grassroots level and chipping away at it and not making any upward movement as far as any person in authority saying, yes, this should be done.
Finding that letter that Chancellor Oakley wrote,
Mm-hmm.
college presidents, start with that and start pushing
Okay.
it through your academic senate to start
Okay.
buy-in and through your tech committees. Some campuses may have a 508 coordinator. This is another position that I see people kind of collapsing the positions. They might be a 508 / ADA coordinator, or you might have a 508 coordinator or someone responsible for 508 within the IT department. Working also in collaboration with that person, because that will help with the campus access and the BP-AP conversation.
Okay, yeah, we're trying to get those positions, but there aren't any. So I know there's.
We can have more conversation. I think the purpose of this presentation today is to really help the CCC Accessibility Center understand what barriers are out there, and any way the Chancellor's Office can help communicate with the administration might be helpful as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, one more question in the chat is, I'm wondering how other IT departments are promoting this. How are they relying, or how are they relying on disability services, etc., to take the lead?
What IT departments were on this call?
I'm here from Foothill De Anza. And there's, I think there's 3 other people from Foothill De Anza here. One, there's me and one other IT person, and then there's the other 2 people. And we have an educational technology committee, but and I don't know if they're taking the lead or not. My focus in my own position isn't on accessibility, but I've mentioned it to the other people in IT, but I'm not sure how it's being coordinated. I don't hear a lot about it.
Any other IT departments on the call?
Yeah, that coordinator of online accessibility position that I held was in IT. And that's in our situation, that's definitely the best place for it to be. Because otherwise it would probably be in distance education, and that might be more siloed. But we had support from the IT brass from the get-go for creating that position, and that really helped. And again, I want to just kind of stress what Corinne said earlier. We really leveraged lawsuits. We tried to scare everybody into the belief that we were going to get sued. And I went to cabinet multiple times and showed them all the lawsuits that had been happening. And we just really beat that drum at the beginning, and that really served us. Yeah.
It also helped that the HR director I spoke of earlier, who was a VP, she also became aware of how many PDFs were on the HR site that were not accessible. And it put the fear of God personally into her. So that helped as well, I think.
This
Yeah,
is
that's
Dawn
right.
from,
Sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, this is Dawn from Grossmont College, and I apologize I came in late because I was leading a training, but I feel like I can share what I've done because we're finally moving the needle at our college. I started at the district where I started learning about accessibility, and nobody wanted to hear it. And I kept saying, hey, we have to make our documents, so I can relate to that whole HR situation. Then I moved down to the campus as an instructional design technology specialist. and just grassroots at first, just trying to let our faculty know. We made it a requirement that their projects have to be accessible in order to get their DE certification so that they can teach online. And we just kept picking away at it. And then I got a dean is very good at listening to me and hearing these things. And he's been very supportive, and we just kept bringing it up over and over. So we're running projects, we're running workshops, talking about it as much as we can, and then brought it up at every meeting. And so we just recently got an accessibility position prioritized as #1. So it's the very next position that will be created and filled. And what I did was I pointed out how much of my time, they can't hire another instructional design person, but yet so much of my time is spent helping faculty understand accessibility, that I'm like, if you had somebody take that off my plate, then I can do what I'm really supposed to be doing. And so I'm just sharing that as just what worked for us, and I'm excited that we're moving forward. And I think you just have to keep having those conversations.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear the bandwidth for this topic is, speaking for myself, very tiring. I know how much work I personally have put into this topic over the years, but it's worth it. It's worth it because the outcome is our students graduating. And this pandemic, I worry. So we can't stop having this conversation, because we know what the conversations are with our students. I know what the conversations are with faculty who are feeling frustrated being online for so many hours of the day. I know what the tutoring challenges are, but we have to make sure that we use each other as support systems, and we definitely need to make sure that the Chancellor's Office is hearing us, what the concerns are, what the barriers are, so that the financial support is there in the future. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for your questions. We're all here, and good luck for spring 2021.
Yes, and I would like to wrap this up by saying earlier in this fiscal year, the Accessibility Center did do an audit of all of the board policy web pages within the CCC. And at that point in time, there were only 16 board policies out approved for the recent, the more recent accessibility. So that's one of the reasons why we wanted to encourage and have this presentation today is there may be many of you out there that have this in various stages, but there is still a huge need to push getting board policies adopted within our system. And with that, we'll say thank you, and we'll go ahead and end the recording and give our captioner a break.